Green Goblin. Norman Osborn was a wealthy and brilliant scientist who ran Oscorp, one of the most powerful tech companies in the world. While developing a performance-enhancing chemical formula for the military, Norman tested it on himself after the project faced cancellation. The serum worked, dramatically boosting his strength, speed, and intellect, but it also drove him insane. Using Oscorp's experimental equipment, Norman built himself a high-tech glider and an arsenal of explosive pumpkin bombs, becoming the Green Goblin. He remains one of Spider-Man's most personal enemies, responsible for some of the most devastating moments in Peter Parker's life. Dr. Octopus. Otto Octavius was a renowned nuclear physicist who designed a set of mechanical tentacle arms to safely handle radioactive materials from a distance. During a lab accident, the harness fused to his spine, and the neural interface connecting the arms to his brain was permanently damaged, allowing the arms to influence his thoughts. The accident also left him with chronic pain and a deteriorating mental state. With the ability to control four powerful adamantium tentacles with his mind, Otto became Dr. Octopus, a villain dangerous enough to defeat Spider-Man multiple times in direct combat. Venom. Eddie Brock was a journalist whose career was destroyed after Spider-Man exposed one of his stories as false. Bitter and broken, Eddie found himself bonded to an alien symbiote that Peter Parker had previously rejected. The symbiote already had knowledge of Spider-Man's abilities and identity from its time with Peter, and when it merged with Eddie, it created something far more dangerous. Venom possesses all of Spider-Man's powers, plus the ability to bypass his spider sense entirely, making him one of the few villains who can genuinely catch Peter off guard. Carnage. Cletus Cassidy was a serial killer serving multiple life sentences when Eddie Brock was briefly placed in the same cell. The Venom symbiote broke Eddie out, but left behind an offspring that bonded directly with Cletus through his bloodstream. Because the new symbiote entered through his blood rather than forming an external bond, it became a permanent part of his biology, making it nearly impossible to remove. Combined with Cletus's already murderous psychology, Carnage became one of the most unhinged and lethal villains in the Marvel Universe, so dangerous that Spider-Man and Venom were forced to team up just to stop him. Electro. Max Dillon was an electrical engineer and lineman who was struck by lightning while working on a power line, simultaneously coming into contact with a high-voltage cable. Instead of killing him, the accident restructured his biology, turning him into a living electrical capacitor. Max can generate, absorb, and project massive amounts of electricity, fly by riding magnetic fields, and move at the speed of lightning over short distances. His powers have only grown over time, with some versions of the character capable of absorbing entire power grids. Sandman. Flint Marko was a small-time criminal on the run from authorities when he stumbled into a nuclear test site and was caught in a particle bombardment experiment. The energy fused his body with the sand on the beach, breaking him down at a molecular level and restructuring him as a being made entirely of animated sand. Flint can shape his body into any form, harden his sand into a near-concrete density, and regenerate from almost any injury by reconstituting his particles. Despite his power, Flint has always been more of a desperate man than a true villain, often driven by his desire to provide for his sick daughter. Vulture. Adrian Toombs was an electrical engineer who built an electromagnetic harness that allowed him to fly using a pair of mechanical wings. After being cheated out of his business by a corrupt partner, he used the suit to turn to a life of crime, becoming the Vulture. The harness doesn't just give him flight, it also enhances his physical strength considerably and in some versions drains the life force from anyone he grabs, which over time has kept him physically younger despite his age. Adrian is one of the oldest recurring Spider-Man villains and one of the few who operates entirely through his own engineering rather than a lab accident or serum. Mysterio. Quentin Beck was a special effects artist and stuntman in Hollywood who felt overlooked and underappreciated despite his genuine talent. Using his expertise in illusions, robotics, and gas-based hallucination technology, he constructed an elaborate persona as a superhero, then a supervillain, depending on what gave him the most leverage. Mysterio has no superhuman abilities. Everything he does is a trick, but his technology is sophisticated enough to fool Spider-Man's spider sense, create convincing physical constructs, and manufacture scenarios so believable that even experienced heroes have been deceived. Kraven the Hunter. Sergei Kravinov is one of the world's greatest hunters, a man who has tracked and killed the most dangerous animals alive using nothing but his own skill and physical ability. Having conquered every natural challenge available to him, Kraven set his sights on Spider-Man, viewing him as the ultimate prey. To push his body to its limits, Kraven uses a mystical jungle potion derived from rare herbs that enhances his strength, speed, and senses to near superhuman levels and dramatically slows his aging. His goal has never been to kill Spider-Man cheaply. He wants to prove he is the better man, which makes him one of the few Spider-Man villains driven purely by ego and obsession rather than greed or revenge. Rhino. Alexei Sitsevich was a low-level enforcer who volunteered for a criminal science experiment in exchange for money to send home to his family. The experiment bonded a nearly indestructible polymer suit to his skin, transforming him into the Rhino. The suit cannot be removed and gives Alexei superhuman strength and durability, along with enough raw momentum to punch through walls and flip vehicles. He is not a tactical villain. His power comes entirely from brute force, and he has been used repeatedly by smarter criminals as a weapon rather than a partner. Lizard. Kurt Connors was a brilliant biologist and surgeon who lost his right arm while serving as a military doctor. Obsessed with the regenerative capabilities of reptiles, Connors spent years developing a serum derived from lizard DNA that he hoped could regrow lost limbs in humans. He tested it on himself and it worked. His arm grew back. But the serum didn't stop there. It continued altering his biology, suppressing his human psychology, and transforming him into a massive, savage reptilian creature. The lizard retains Connors' scientific intelligence in fragments, but operates primarily on predatory instinct, making him both pitiable and extremely dangerous. Hobgoblin. Ned Leeds was a reporter for the Daily Bugle and a close friend of Peter Parker, which made his turn into the Hobgoblin one of the more personal betrayals in Spider-Man's history. Ned didn't discover the Goblin equipment himself. He was brainwashed by Roderick Kingsley, who used him as a decoy hobgoblin to throw off suspicion, while the real one continued operating freely in the background. Kingsley trained Ned and sent him out as Hobgoblin repeatedly, keeping his own hands clean while Ned took all the risk and all the heat. Ned never fully understood what was being done to him due to the psychological conditioning, and that made him both a genuine threat in the field and a tragic figure at the same time. He was eventually killed by the Foreigner, a professional assassin hired by Kingsley to permanently close the loose end, cementing just how disposable he had been to the man pulling the strings the entire time. Scorpion. Mac Gargan was a private investigator hired by J. Jonah Jameson to uncover Spider-Man's identity. When that failed, Jameson funded a scientific experiment that bonded Mac to a cybernetic scorpion suit, giving him enhanced strength, speed, and a powerful mechanical tail capable of punching through steel. The procedure worked physically, but the suit's bonding process caused severe psychological damage, leaving Mac increasingly unstable. He eventually became one of Spider-Man's more persistent enemies, and later bonded with the Venom symbiote, making him significantly more dangerous before it was ultimately separated from him. Shocker. Herman Schultz was a professional burglar and self-taught engineer who built a pair of vibroshock gauntlets while in prison using materials he found available to him. The Gauntlets project concentrated blasts of vibrating air pressure powerful enough to crack concrete and send Spider-Man flying. Herman is not a mad scientist or a product of experimentation. He built his technology himself out of practical necessity and treats his criminal career more like a trade than a vendetta. He is often underestimated, but his gauntlets are legitimately dangerous, and he knows how to use them effectively. Kingpin. Wilson Fisk grew up in poverty, bullied and powerless, and spent his entire life building himself into the opposite of what he was as a child. Through ruthless ambition, he clawed his way to the top of New York's criminal underworld, eventually controlling organized crime across multiple cities. Fisk has no superhuman abilities. What he has is money, influence, and a body that is almost entirely muscle, making him physically capable of going toe-to-toe with street-level heroes. He operates from the shadows, insulated by lawyers and shell companies, and is one of the few villains who has outmaneuvered Spider-Man politically rather than physically. Mr. Negative. Martin Lee is publicly known as a generous philanthropist who runs a shelter for the homeless in New York. In reality, he is the leader of the Inner Demons, a powerful criminal organization, and possesses a dual personality split between his benevolent public persona and a ruthless criminal alter ego. His powers stem from a botched experiment involving drug trafficking and an experimental treatment, which left him with the ability to corrupt others through touch, turning allies into temporary servants, and to generate a dark energy that can cut through almost anything. The contrast between his two identities makes him one of Spider-Man's more psychologically complex villains. Tombstone. Lonnie Lincoln grew up being tormented for his albinism and turned that experience into fuel for a career as one of New York's most feared enforcers. Through either a chemical exposure or genetic mutation, depending on the version, his skin and bones hardened to a near impenetrable density, and his strength increased to superhuman levels. Tombstone doesn't run crime operations from behind a desk. He is a street level enforcer who has gone up against Spider Man and Daredevil alike and walked away. His threat comes from the combination of physical invulnerability and a complete absence of fear or hesitation. Chameleon. Dmitry Smerdyakov is the half-brother of Kraven the Hunter and the first recurring villain Spider-Man ever faced. A master of disguise, Dmitry uses a combination of mask-making, acting ability, and eventually advanced technology to perfectly replicate the appearance and mannerisms of virtually anyone. He has impersonated Spider-Man, Peter Parker, and dozens of other individuals for espionage and sabotage purposes. In later versions of the character, his face-changing technology became so advanced that he could alter his appearance in seconds, making him one of the most difficult villains to track or predict. Hydro-Man. Morris Bench was a merchant marine who fell overboard during a battle between Spider-Man and a villain near an experimental underwater generator. The energy from the generator interacted with the seawater around him and restructured his entire body at a molecular level, turning him into living water. Hydro Man can transform his body into liquid form, propel water at high pressure, rehydrate after being evaporated, and drown targets by engulfing them entirely. He is often treated as a lower tier villain, but his power set is genuinely difficult to counter, since most physical attacks simply pass through him. Morbius the Living Vampire. Michael Morbius was a Nobel Prize-winning biochemist suffering from a rare and fatal blood disease. Desperate to find a cure, he developed an experimental treatment combining electroshock therapy with an enzyme derived from vampire bats. The treatment stopped the disease but transformed him into something he never intended. Morbius developed a need to consume blood, an aversion to light, superhuman strength and speed, the ability to fly using membrane-like wings, and an accelerated healing factor. Unlike most of Spider-Man's villains, Morbius is not evil by nature. He is a tragic figure trying to control something he never asked for. The Hand. The Hand is an ancient and secretive ninja organization with origins in feudal Japan, founded on the worship of a dark mystical entity known as the Beast. Over centuries, they built a global criminal and mercenary network operating in the shadows of governments and corporations alike. What makes the Hand particularly dangerous beyond their combat training is their ability to resurrect the dead, bringing fallen warriors back as loyal, controllable servants. They have clashed with Spider-Man, Daredevil, and numerous other street-level heroes, often serving as hired muscle for more prominent villains or pursuing their own supernatural objectives. The Spot. Jonathan Owen was a scientist working for the Kingpin who was tasked with replicating the teleportation abilities of the hero Cloak. During an experiment, he successfully created a stable portal, but when the power cut out, he was pulled into it and emerged, covered in black dots across his entire body. Each dot is a miniature portal connected to a dimension Owen can use to teleport instantly, redirect attacks back at opponents, and create openings in mid-air to drop enemies from lethal heights. Initially dismissed as a joke villain, the Spot has been reimagined in recent years as one of the most conceptually terrifying threats Spider-Man has ever faced. Jackal. Miles Warren was a genetics professor at Empire State University who developed an obsession with Gwen Stacy, one of Peter Parker's classmates. After her death, Warren used his expertise in cloning to try and bring her back, a process that gradually unraveled his sanity. He eventually cloned both Gwen and Peter Parker himself, setting off one of the most chaotic storylines in Spider-Man history. The Jackal enhanced his own body with a formula that gave him superhuman agility and strength, but his real threat has always been scientific, using cloning and genetic manipulation to attack Peter in ways no amount of physical power ever could. Boomerang. Fred Myers was an Australian professional baseball pitcher whose career ended after he was caught taking bribes. With his arm and his reputation both wasted, he was recruited by the Secret Empire, a criminal organization that saw potential in his throwing accuracy. They equipped him with a specialized suit and a set of razor-edged boomerangs, engineered with different payloads, including explosive, sonic, and shrapnel variants. Fred has no superhuman abilities whatsoever. His entire threat comes from near-perfect throwing precision and the fact that his weapons always come back. He is consistently underestimated, which is exactly the kind of villain that gets Spider-Man hurt when he isn't paying attention. Tarantula. Anton Miguel Rodriguez was a ruthless enforcer and assassin working for a fascist South American government, trained as a black ops agent and used to silence political opposition. After carrying out an unauthorized assassination that embarrassed his handlers, he was marked for elimination and forced to flee. Before escaping, he underwent a government-sponsored enhancement procedure that increased his strength and agility to near superhuman levels. His signature weapons are the poison spikes built into the toes and heels of his boots, capable of delivering paralyzing toxins on contact. Anton eventually made his way to New York, where he crossed paths with Spider-Man repeatedly, bringing a ruthlessness to their fights that most street-level criminals simply don't have. Morlun. Morlun is not a product of science or accident. He is an ancient parasitic being who has existed for centuries, hunting and feeding on the life force of individuals connected to a totemic animal, what the comics call the web of life. Spider-Man falls directly into that category, which makes Peter one of Morlun's primary targets. Morlun is physically stronger than almost anything Spider-Man has ever faced, is virtually impossible to injure through conventional means, and regenerates from damage rapidly. He has killed Peter Parker outright in at least one storyline. What makes him uniquely terrifying is that he is not motivated by revenge or money or power. He simply feeds, and Spider-Man is food.